Now it's time to hear the stories of Utes in their own words. This is Utes Insider presented by Pepsi. Here's your host, Mike Lageschulte.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second edition of Utes Insider presented by Pepsi. I'm Mike Lageschulte, and great to have you with us for this new podcast featuring interviews with current and former Utah athletics and coaches and other key individuals around the Utah athletics community. We just launched this a few weeks ago, and during our first show, we caught up with Donnie Daniels, who is currently the men's basketball director of player development at Utah. He's a former assistant coach. In fact, he was at the U under Rick Majerus during the 1998 Final Four run. So great to catch up with Donnie last week. And now for our second show, we turn to gymnastics in the entertainment world with former All-American Kristina Baskett. She had a great career with the Utes from 2006 to 2009. In fact, as a freshman, she was the national bars champion and had a great 4-year career, 12-time All-American, and came here with the intention of getting into broadcast communications and fell in love with photography. And it ends up she has spent a long time in front of the camera the past decade or so. She got her start performing in San Diego in a show at SeaWorld. Also spent 2 years in Las Vegas with Cho's Le Rev and Cirque du Soleil's Viva Elvis, and then ended up in a career as a stunt performer for a long time, over 100 credits now with motion pictures, TV shows, and commercials. You might remember her role as the stunt double for Arya Stark in Game of Thrones. So it'll be fun to catch up with Kristina and kind of relive her time with the U and what she's doing now and get caught up on that. That should be a great conversation. So come back and join us. Kristina Baskett, former All-American gymnast. She'll join us when we come back. This is the Utes Insider presented by Pepsi.
To hear more episodes of this show and other Utah athletics podcasts, search for them on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Now back to more of Utes Insider presented by Pepsi.
And welcome back to Utes Insider presented by Pepsi, our second show. And pleased to be joined by a person who's well known for gymnastics, well known in the entertainment business, Kristina Baskett, who is joining us from Tempe, Arizona. Kristina, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm excited, and I'm honored to be part of the second episode.
Well, this is exciting. And when I came up with the idea for the show, a person like yourself is what I had in mind. I've been dealing with the Hall of Fame videos over the years, and I get to meet so many people who were here in the past and had these great stories about how they came to Utah and what their time at Utah was like, and also what they're doing now. And I just thought with us being in the month of April and gymnastics normally coming to its crescendo, this would be a great time to get you on. So we'll get into your gymnastics and what you're doing now later on, but let's just start out with kind of the current situation we're all dealing with. I mean, you're an expecting mom, as Megan Marsden told us during our live stream of the Utah ASU gymnastics meet that your due date's coming up, and you're also at ASU as an assistant coach with gymnastics. So a lot to deal with as an expecting mom and also a coach trying to keep up with your athletes. How are you dealing with all of it the past month or so, Kristina?
And, definitely. And of course, it's, everyone is dealing with it. So I feel like now that we've been into it a little bit, it is a little bit easier to wrap your mind around it. But at first, it was very strange because we were, in season with ASU and traveling. We actually were, when everything kind of went down, we actually were on a plane to LSU to compete at LSU. And during our plane flight was when they canceled basically everything. And so as we went to ASU or at LSU, we ended up just staying at the airport and turning around and get back on a flight. And I think at that point, it was really hard to wrap our minds around everything. But, and then just slowly over the last few weeks, with just every season being canceled, NCAAs, me being expecting mother, there's a lot to handle at once, but everyone is going through it. So, it's just kind of one day at a time, and everyone is in the same situation. So it is very strange for our athletes to not be able to do anything, but everybody is in the same boat. So in a way, it kind of makes it easier to wrap your mind around, but I know everyone's anxious to be able to get back to normal life, but it's, for me too, I wanted everything to be safe and, for my expecting baby. So, it's kind of a one day at a time thing.
Yeah, it's been hard. I think the hardest part was the suddenness and how quickly it changed. We all knew this might be coming. You kind of heard some whispers and then some rumbles in early March that, hey, this thing is coming. It might not be good. And then, but all of a sudden, within about 3 days, we went from Lisa, Utah planning to have a meet against Utah State on a Friday night to not having fans to not having it at all. And within about 72 hours, the sports world shut down like everything else. And you were in a position where you were actually traveling to a meet, and traveling and had to get everyone home. So I guess, for your athletes, how have they dealt with that? And just sort of, how's it been for them to just all of a sudden, one, have their season done, and two, be like, we have to go home. We have to leave campus. We have to get out of here. How have they been dealing with all that?
It was very strange. And I think just the suddenness was the hardest part of just letting it sink in. I think that was the hardest part. And then, it starts small and then you just realize the biggest impact on it. The first thing was like, oh my gosh, you feel so bad for your seniors. And then you feel bad for all the Pac-12 seniors in gymnastics. And then you start thinking about all the other sports and then just how wide it reaches, it just starts growing. And I think the initial suddenness of it was the hardest part for everybody to understand. And, it's just everyone is going through it. So it definitely makes it easier, but it doesn't make it, it still is sad for literally all the athletes, not just the gymnasts and not just, the ASU and Utah girls. I feel for them. I just can't imagine that happening when I was an athlete. Right. So it's just, you feel for these athletes. But again, we're all in it together. So I love seeing, the different ways they're trying to honor each of the athletes. And I hope, at some point we'll get to kind of do more to have, honor them in a greater way. I'm sure Utah's going to do something fantastic for their athletes, next season or when, everything gets back to normal. So it's just more, it's hard I feel that for all the sports, not just gymnastics, which I'm closest to, of course.
Yeah. Well, you know how it is. Your window is only so wide. And even though you extend the chance to come back or you freeze eligibility, you still can't go back and do 2020 over again. And no team is ever the same. And as you mentioned, the suddenness has been tough, but at the same time, we're all in this together. And we're kind of hoping through this podcast to tell some good stories and help fans reconnect with athletes and teams that will bring some joy into people's lives as we kind of play out the next couple of months or so.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I know for gymnastics, as far and similar to some other sports, it's the times it's the end of the road for them as far as your career. Not like they go on to be professional gymnasts or, there's not a lot of opportunities for gymnastics. So for those type of sports, I feel bad because, these athletes have been preparing for their careers to be over, and for it to be cut a little short is a little bitter. But I think that's hard too, because this is like the end of their sport that they've done their whole lives.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's
difficult. And then the gyms are closed. I mean, for someone who's so used to working out every day and their routine, it's been disrupted in a big way.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Kristina, I know for Utah fans, they knew you pretty well when you were here. That it's a diehard fan base, and I know some have tracked you since the time you left the U with your career in Vegas, and now doing some stunt double work. But let's go back to kind of where it all started for you with gymnastics. I remember when we put you into the Hall of Fame, you kind of told me about your background, and you told me at age 2 is when you got started in gymnastics. That's a pretty young age, and obviously carried you a long way. Maybe just talk about why you decided to start gymnastics, and maybe at that point it was your parents who got you started. But how did it all begin for you?
Yeah, no, it seems kind of silly to say that you started a sport at the age of 2, but I always remind people that I wasn't not training for the Olympics at the age of 2, right. but my parents put me in every sport, the most common sports you do as a child. I did, soccer, swimming, t-ball, dance, gymnastics, and just kind of explored all those options. And it wasn't till a little bit later where I had to kind of start picking and choosing which sports I wanted to do as far as time-wise goes. And gymnastics is, it's quite a young sport. So you do have to put a lot of time into it at a young age. And so about age 6 or 7 was kind of when I needed to start deciding if that's the route I wanted to go. And I ended up choosing between soccer and gymnastics, but it was kind of a no-brainer that I was in love with gymnastics. So around 7 was when it kind of took over my life in a way that's a little bit stereotypical gymnastics. I started leaving school early in 2nd grade. And then by the time I was in high school, I ended up doing half online school, half public school, just so I could spend the amount of time you need in the gym. And I did want to go the Olympic route, and around 15, 16, around 2004 Olympic range was kind of when I was on that route, doing like USA championships and national team. That didn't quite pan out, but I did end up getting, my top choice in college gymnastics, which for me was the biggest payoff of all. So
yeah, it worked out pretty well for you in the end, but
so.
yeah. You were fortunate though. I mean, I've talked to some gymnasts who basically have to move across the country to get the right gym for them to train in, but you were able to stay in Seattle the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of my former teammates, did that, like lived with other families. But I did find a gym. It was quite far away from me. It was almost an hour drive from my gym.
Okay.
From my home. And I did, like in high school, I did 2-a-day practices. So it was a ton of driving. And I'm so grateful for my parents, for putting all that time in since I was like 7. But it really does, gymnastics is more of a club sport versus a high school sport. So, finding that right club and the right match for you as an athlete is really good. And I absolutely loved my club and was glad that I was in the right place. But it is quite common, like you were saying, that, people will move across, the country and live with other families even.
Yeah. Gymnastics is such a unique sport in the sense that, like you said, it's such a young sport. I mean, you are in your young teens, and that's when you're starting to hit your peak, and you have to decide, am I going for a national team type of a career? Am I just good doing what I'm doing and maybe going to college? But for you, was there ever a point where you thought, you know what, I maybe have a chance to make the Olympic team at some point? Did that ever happen for you?
That was definitely my goal from a child, for sure. I had all the posters all over my room, and, when people asked me what I was going to do with my life, I was like, oh, I'm going to be an Olympic gymnast. And at the time, college gymnastics actually wasn't as big as it is now. And that's one of the biggest things I'm so excited for with NCAA gymnastics now, that has grown so much, because when I was younger, it wasn't as big, and it wasn't something that people worked towards as much. It was almost like, well, if you weren't, good enough, you did college. So for me, when I was younger, I wasn't like all into college gymnastics, and I was just all about the Olympics. It's hard because to say, for me as a child, I wasn't. I was in like the back half. As far as like the top 20 in the nation, I always was in like kind of that back 10. Like I always placed between like 10 to 20th, which is, it's pretty
good. Yeah.
To be like in the top 20, but to make the Olympics now, this year, I think there's only 4 athletes that make the Olympic team. Last Olympics it was 5. So really, if you're kind of in that, literally that really, really top, just that top number, 5 through 10, your chances are pretty slim. And I was always kind of just floating in that back 20, but it's still impressive. And so for me, it didn't work out, but I'm so glad that I ended up going into college gymnastics, and it really has changed so much. And I'm so excited that NCAA gymnastics is such a big thing for gymnastics now.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, when you were growing up in the 90s and so forth, it wasn't what it is now. And I think with the SEC schools and the Big 12 schools and some others around the Pac-12, the money is there now to really fund these programs properly. And the television has helped it take off. I know Greg Marston was huge in helping reconstruct the national championships to a 4-on-the-floor format, which I think will be good down the road, but it has grown a lot. So, for you, it was a great option when you were done with your pre-college career and finishing up high school. College was a real option for someone like yourself. What led you to Utah when you came here in 2006?
No, absolutely. When I was starting to look at schools, at the time, UCLA was my top pick, actually.
Okay. Yep.
But because I didn't know anything about Utah, and it was just what I was exposed to, as far as there was a couple of gymnasts that were older than me from my gym that went to UCLA and were big standouts at UCLA. And it was kind of the time they were winning a lot of championships, and my former teammate won the all around. So I think it was just more of what I was exposed to. that I, in my mind, just envisioned myself going to UCLA.
Right. Who's your former teammate that won the all around?
Her name is Ani Willis, and she is Hall of Famer, one of the best athletes from UCLA. She's incredible.
Yeah.
He was kind of who I looked up to growing up from my gym. So I kind of, from my mind was set, I was like, oh, I'm going to go to UCLA. And it wasn't until I actually started exploring my college options did Utah catch my eye. And once they did, it kind of right away, I was drawn to Utah. And then once I went and visited Utah was really when I knew that it was the right fit for me. I actually was looking at Utah, UCLA, and ASU. I mean, where my top
about that. How about that?
But once I went and visited UCLA, and then I went and visited Utah, and pretty much after I visited Utah, I just knew it was the right fit for me. I loved the city. I loved Greg and Megan so much. And I just loved the culture of Utah and just the way the community loved the sport. It was, I think it was like what Greg and Megan created, as their culture. And for me, it was a really good fit. My parents loved it. I loved it. And I just knew that it was a right fit for me. And so pretty much from there, I was all in for Utah.
It's interesting to hear you tell your story. As a West Coast kid, I mean, UCLA is a big brand name. There's no way to get around that at schools like Utah. Just have to kind of deal with that during the recruiting process. But one thing I've heard from coaches at Utah over the years, and Greg is one of them, he's been like, listen, if I can get someone on campus, if we can get them to fly out here and take a look at us, we've got a pretty good chance just for the city and the beauty. And also that time when you were being recruited, they had just finished their but their training facility that was pretty new, and they were one of the first schools to do that. So I'm guessing that maybe played a little bit in your decision as well.
Oh, absolutely. It was pretty mind-blowing to see the facilities at Utah at the time and now.
Yeah.
But it was, I think what I remember describing it to like my friends when they would ask me why Utah. I think I used to describe it where it's like you literally get treated like a princess there. Literally, it's like the best facilities. It's just like everything was top of the line, and the community just loves you. Like you literally are like a princess.
Yeah. Megan has told me that as well. She goes, it's sometimes hard when our gymnasts leave because they are treated so well, and they are celebrities in this big metro area when they're in college. Absolutely.
Yes, definitely. And I think what I've learned too of just am kind of learning more of the expanse of NCAA gymnastics and just the different programs. There really is a place for every type of person and different personalities. There's all sorts of different, types of athletes and just people. And, there's people who are going to be drawn to UCLA and just what that brings.
Right.
As their, just the play, LA, the culture of UCLA is very different than the culture of a Utah and an ASU, and every place is different. So I think that's what I've seen more of is, you're just going to you have so many different personalities that are going to be better fit for different people. And for me, it was an obvious choice, or it was obvious that I fit better into the Utah culture.
Yeah. Well, we're glad that you decided to come this direction with your career as you got here in 2006. Let's talk about that freshman season for you. You came in right away, 2006 national champion on bars. What a way to start your career. Just maybe walk us through that first season and your adjustment to college and how you did so well at the collegiate level so quickly.
No, yeah, definitely. For me, college gymnastics was such a great time for me to blossom as an athlete. I did kind of struggle in the elite gymnastics world. I won't go into it too much, but it is quite different. The type of gymnastics from elite to college, there are different rules and there's different things that are important in your gymnastics. And so for me, college gymnastics was a better fit. That I struggled a little bit with my confidence in elite because I just struggled with that, the way my routines and gymnastics needed to be. But when I got to college, I had such a I finally kind of fell into like my mental maturity and physical maturity, so I could actually have confidence, and I really blossomed, right from the start. It is kind of a transition for a lot of people, but I feel like my transition was quite smooth, and I was rewarded just on paper. And I actually I won NCAAs on uneven bars, and that was the event I struggled with my whole life, really.
Wow.
That was kind of the nemesis through my childhood, where I went, in and out of, maybe not even wanting to do gymnastics because I struggled so much on uneven bars. So for me to go from, struggling with that to then becoming NCAA champion on uneven bars was a huge uplift for my confidence, and kind of set the stage for the rest time where I just really found my groove in college gymnastics and was do the gymnastics I always wanted to do. It was more mental than physical, and to be able to make it to that place in your career as an athlete is, for me, one of my accomplishments, just to be able to be at the mental and confident that I've always been to be in.
Kristina, I've heard gymnasts talk about that change from elite to college. I might be oversimplifying this, but elite is more about the skill level. In college, do they tend to reward consistency and clean routines more? Is that oversimplifying things?
No, I think that's exactly what it is.
Okay.
College, there is a high standard of skills, but if it's all about doing it as perfect as possible versus you do get rewarded for difficulty in elite, and there's no cap to it. So it's kind of like, you just kind of got to throw everything you can. And in college, it's about how well you do it. So for me, that was a really, that helped my gymnastics a lot.
Yeah.
But it definitely is a transition.
Well, looking at your career, as we mentioned, you were national champion on bars in 2006, and you would not have known that was a struggle for you, that event, the way you started out. But, it seemed like to me later in your career, you became just a terrific all-around performer. It wasn't just one event. In fact, your last year, you were making a charge at gold in the all-around. You won your qualifying session before you placed second overall. That last year, you were third on 3 events, vault, bars, and beams. So it just seems like, as you moved on through college, you talked about your confidence and learning how to be consistent and clean. It just seemed like as you moved along, that consistency and clean performing really came together for you across the board.
Yes, no, definitely. And I can't say enough how well Utah was such a good fit for me as far as the coaches, the coaching staff, between Greg and Megan and Jeff Graba, who was our assistant coach at the time, who's now the head coach at Auburn.
Right. Yeah.
He was, and again, like after I won NCAAs on bars, it's not like everything got better. I still struggled. I still struggled with that my whole career, and just with confidence and consistency. I struggled on bounce beam a little bit with consistency, but the coaches were so good with working with me, and just we did a lot with sports psychology with Dr. Hench at University of Utah, and just there were so many people that were involved with helping us grow as athletes. And for me, it was made all the difference. And I was able to, just thrive in those years and just the whole team and the atmosphere. I wasn't really used to being on a team too. Like when I was growing up, I was kind of the only athlete at my gym at that level. So I think just all of those things combined just really helped me get to a place where I was so excited to be able to contribute and be a part. And really our main goal was to win an NCAA championship as a team. So that was all, I wanted to be the best I could be for our counting score. And it was such a fun ride. And I learned so much during those years that have carried on even beyond. So I cannot say enough good things about everyone that was involved with my time there.
Yeah. Talking to Kristina Baskett, former All-American gymnast and national champion gymnast at the U from 2006 until 2009. You led me to my next question, Kristina. The team finishes 3 runner-ups during your career. And I could see this 2 ways. One is you were second best as a team in the country. At the same time, you missed out on first place. So as you look back at those runner-up finishes 3 times in your career, was it satisfying or maybe a little bit frustrating to not get that team championship?
It's definitely bittersweet. At the time, it definitely wasn't satisfying.
Right.
We were so close, and I really do think we did have what it takes to be, and we put everything out there. And I think it could have gone either way. It was that close. So for us at the time, it definitely wasn't satisfying. But looking back now, I couldn't be happier, and I wouldn't change a thing about my experience. So, I mean, I like you said, second best. There's so many people who would have loved to be in that position, which I've learned as well, that we're so lucky to have been at that level that for me, I wouldn't change a thing. And I'm so happy with what we accomplished. And a lot of it, is the process.
Right.
So that in itself, I wouldn't take anything else. And I'm just so pleased with my career and what we were able to accomplish at the time.
Yeah, that was a great run for Utah Gymnastics and for yourself as well. As I mentioned, 12 All-America citations and a national championship for you on bars. Let's talk about your time at Utah out of the gym, mass communications degree, also electronic journalism, and you also developed a passion for photography during your time at Utah. Interesting that you ended up in front of the camera instead of behind it as the years played out. But what drew you to photography during that time?
Yeah, it's funny how everything since has been nothing what I thought it was going to be while I was in college, like literally nothing, but in a good way.
Yes.
I fell in love with photography in high school before I came to college, and I actually I wanted to do a photography major at the U. But you had to do it through the art department, and I had to do some other, I had to do drawing and sculpting, which aren't my passions or expertise. So I ended up straying away from that. And I actually chose communication broadcast journalism because of the media coverage we got as athletes there. Kind of going on some of the radio shows and TV shows and just the high profile Utah Gymnastics gets, that it kind of intrigued me. I was like, okay, that's something I would maybe be interested in. So I actually chose that major just from being at Utah, my first year. And I really enjoyed it. And that was what I was planning to do after school, actually, was do an internship at one of the local stations and kind of, maybe going to broadcasting. Obviously I didn't do that, but that's a whole other story in itself.
And we'll get to that, but interesting. Your experience at Utah almost got you into TV broadcast journalism. That's great. Yeah.
No, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the major. And I still was able to take some photography classes and grow that as well. And I have continued to do that later on in life. But I'm glad I did the broadcast major, even though I didn't end up pursuing it.
So it ended up kind of leading you to a path that led you to Vegas at one point. So let's kind of finish up your Utah career. So again, here from 2006 to 2009, and you got or developed a love for photography, and then as you mentioned, for college gymnasts, that's the end of the road. There is no professional level in that sport, but we've seen some others like yourself get into the Las Vegas show scene, and that's where you ended up. In fact, how many years were you in Vegas during those shows?
I ended up doing 2 years in Vegas.
Okay.
Different shows, actually.
Yeah. La Rev and then Cirque du Soleil's Viva Elvis. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. How'd you get into that?
Yeah, that and all from this point forward, everything was so random and so unexpected and it literally comes down to small connections and network, and literally all of it has been through gymnastics, which I think is so cool, and which is what I like to share a lot with I do some speaking with young gymnasts, and I just love sharing how much gymnastics has brought me. Because like you said, there's not a lot for us for gymnastics, the sport of gymnastics, when you're done with your career. So
right.
I do feel fortunate that I've kind of gotten to find a path that is somewhat related to gymnastics. And literally everything from this point forward has come from my gymnastics connections in some way. And, I honestly was planning to start an internship right after school. And I did like a little summer hiatus in San Diego, which starts with, when I was getting recruited by UCLA, Miss Val, the head coach of UCLA, when she recruited me, like in high school, she was like, yes, obviously you say gymnastics. She goes, but I also do this show at SeaWorld in San Diego that you'd be perfect for.
Really?
And down the line, like after I graduated. And so she like choreographs this, it's kind of like Cirque du Soleil, but it's at SeaWorld San Diego.
Okay.
And she told me that like when I was in high school, and I never forgot it. And when my senior year, we compete at UCLA, I talked to her after the meet. I was like, Miss Val, I know I didn't go to UCLA, but I would still really love to do your show at SeaWorld if you'd have me. And she was like, absolutely. So I ended up, after I graduated, spending a summer in San Diego at SeaWorld.
Wow.
Doing like one of my favorite jobs I've ever had. And it was this like really silly but fun stage show. We had nothing to do with the animals in the water, but it was just almost like a stage show that we would do like 5 20-minute shows a night. And it had like guys and girls gymnasts, rhythmic gymnast, hip hop crew, and a drum line. And we did this really fun show for the summer. And that was kind of my first like live show experience. And then while I was in San Diego, I had another friend reach out to me through Facebook that I grew up doing gymnastics with, that was in the show Le Rêve, that literally came down to a Facebook message, saying, hey, I know you just graduated. We're actually looking for more acrobats for the show Le Rêve, and I think you'd be perfect for it. Would you be interested in auditioning? And so it was something I never, ever thought about, and was still planning to go do my internship after my summer in San Diego. But I ended up driving up to Vegas to do this audition for the show, and ended up getting the part. And I just never came back to Utah after that.
Wow. How about that? I knew Valerie Condos Field. You call her Miss Val, as everyone does, the former UCLA coach. I knew her background was in dance, but I didn't realize she was actually choreographing that show at SeaWorld. That's interesting.
Yeah, it seriously was one of my favorite jobs I've ever had.
Wow, that sounds great. And for you, a nice transition where there was still some gymnastics involved and a little bit of the showbiz aspect. And, there are a lot worse places to live than San Diego, as you know, Kristina.
Oh, yeah.
So that's not a bad place to be for a summer.
It was so fun. And then from there, when I decided not to go back to Utah, and I ended up deciding to take on the show at Le Rêve, was where I do feel like where I completely did a turn away from quote unquote like a normal life. And really that's where everything kind of went off into its own direction. Yeah. And I started just following this mysterious this mysterious path, but that led to all the things that I've done since.
That's great. So it's been a decade, more than a decade now for you in performing. So, okay. So you went to San Diego, did a show there for a summer, a couple years in Vegas, and then the big move as you went back to Los Angeles and began your career as a stunt performer, which is obviously done very well for you. Over 100 credits between motion pictures, TV shows, commercials, and I'll get into your big roles here in just a moment. But just tell us how you went from Vegas back to LA to get into stunt performing. How'd that move transpire for you?
Yeah, that was the scariest and the biggest transition of my life, for sure.
I'm sure it was. Yeah.
The best decision I ever made. And again, it started with gymnastics again. At the time when I was it actually kind of started a little bit when I was at SeaWorld. And then when I was in Vegas, I started doing just a couple of days on this gymnastics show that it was on ABC Family Channel at the time. It was called Make It or Break It. It was like a teen drama about these girls trying to go to the Olympics in gymnastics, completely scripted and very cheesy, but one of those guilty pleasure type of things. And again, I just love that everything has been tied to my gymnastics career, because I knew some former NCAA or some former UCLA gymnasts that were my year that were stunt doubling on the show at the time. And they needed more girls to double the actresses. And they just reached out to me because they knew me from, competing together. And they just reached out being like, hey, we're looking for more girls to double the actresses. And, would you be interested in it? Because, it's hard because with like a gymnastics show, it's not like you can't just hire a normal stunt person. They have to have quite a strong background in gymnastics. But at the same time, gymnastics is such a young sport, you can't pay younger athletes to work because it will ruin their eligibility. So it was trying to find people who had a high level of gymnastics, but that weren't in NCAA, that weren't busy with another life.
Right.
So it was kind of a hard role to fill. And so I actually started working on the show a little bit. And then it was kind of like, okay, well, this is kind of cool. I loved being part of the show and kind of seeing the workings of film. And I had no idea what stunt doubling was at the time. And I slowly just kind of started learning more about it. And we ended up doing 3 seasons of that show. And by the second season, was kind of when I was like, okay, I think I may be interested in this whole stunt thing.
Yeah.
And I have no idea what it is, what I'm doing, but I do know that I should maybe move and try it while I'm filming Make It or Break It, so that I can move to LA, kind of figure out what I'm doing, work full time on the show. And I knew that that was the right time to do it if I was going to do it. So I actually ended up moving to LA and staying on call with the show Viva Elvis.
Okay.
So, and I ended up doing this crazy lifestyle of driving back and forth from Vegas to still do some shows.
Oh my goodness.
And then work on Make It or Break It, and then try and figure out what this whole stunt world was about. And I just knew that I was like, I need to try it now. And if not, I can always go back to Vegas. But I never went back, and it was the best choice that I made. And it all started with this gymnastics show.
Yeah.
And then from there, I just learned the industry, and it spider-web from there. And I don't even know how, sometimes I don't even know how it happened, but it did. And it was really hard. It's a really hard industry to break into, but the same with gymnastics. I was determined. That's what I wanted to do and put the work in, and and people saw that,
Yeah.
And I was able to make a really big impact and reputation in the industry. And I worked really hard on other skill sets, and it was very rewarding.
At some point, did you hire an agent? Is that sort of what really got things moving for you? Or did you know enough people on your own that you could do it yourself at the beginning?
This is actually one of the most common questions I get, especially from other, gymnasts who are looking to get into the industry. I cannot say how weird this industry is, but there actually is no agents for TV and film stunting. It's all very old school, just reputation and networking. It's kind of like who you know and who knows you. And so that's the hardest part, is kind of getting your name out there.
Right.
And people knowing who you are. And it literally just comes down to emails and texting. I literally will get a text message one day that could be like, hey, can you work on the next Marvel film? It's so random.
Oh my goodness.
And we are in a union in the Actors Guild. So a lot of times you need an agent to negotiate contracts and things is one of their major roles. But since we aren't a union, we don't need to negotiate contracts because it's already set. So a lot of that can be eliminated with the middleman. So literally it all is just completely on your own, networking and who you know and who knows you. There is a separate thing. I do have an agent for commercial and print work, which is different. And I actually had quite a lot of success doing commercial work. A lot of people, I was kind of became known in the stunt industry to be a stunt person who does a lot of commercial work, but I did a lot of the nationwide insurance was popular at the time.
Yep, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And those were actually through an agent.
Okay.
But that's kind of a whole separate thing. And I do more work with actual just on TV shows and major motion pictures. And that all is completely separate. So it is a bit confusing because I have worked with an agent before, but majority of what I've done is completely on our own.
Wow. Mm-hmm. I'm surprised to hear that. I didn't ask you that, last year when we did your Hall of Fame video and got into your background a bit. But to me, that would be hard. I mean, you talk to entertainers and they say, yeah, I have an agent. They're working for me. And it's sort of a little bit of a security blanket knowing they have someone who's in the industry, who knows the people who can work on their behalf. But for you, I mean, to go into it and really have to build all your contacts and it's all through your connections. That's how you get it going. To me, that almost would make it even more difficult to make that decision to go that route. Just sort of the uneasiness of the whole process. It
is hard. And then just the entertainment industry in itself is hard with that, every actors, everything. I give props to everybody who is in this crazy industry. And that's why sometimes it's hard I get a lot of inquiries from, other former gymnasts, looking to get into stunts. And it's really hard to give proper advice because I just try and give them as much information as I can give them. But it's hard because it's like, there is no right way to do it. The first thing they ask about is agents. And I'm like, well, there's no agents. There's no right or wrong way to do it. Everyone has done it differently. It could be, it's a lot of it, is luck and a look or your height. I'm lucky that for the height, my height and look is in skill set. There's not a lot of us, but then in other heights and looks, there's a lot more people. There's so many things that play a part that it's really hard. You really have no control over it, which is the hardest part. But if you get going and you make your mark in the industry, it's you won't stop working.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it certainly worked out well for you. I mean, it's been quite the ride the past decade or so. And as I mentioned, 100 credits plus in motion pictures, TV shows, commercials. But you talk to anyone who knows your background, the question they have is obviously about Game of Thrones and the long-running show on HBO where you were the stunt double for Arya Stark. And it's a show, in fact, I just finished binge watching again myself recently with the downturn and all this downtime with no sports to watch. And it was kind of fun to go back and watch that again. For you, if you can just sort of summarize what that ride with that series was like for you.
Yes, no, and for me, it's very exciting too. I'm a fan of the show. I read all the books before it was even a show. So for me, it was exciting. I like working on, I think some of my favorite projects are things that I have a connection with as well. So, I was very excited to get the opportunity to work on the show. It's funny because I will remember the first time they reached out to me to work on it. And in this industry, you definitely learn to not get your hopes up because so many things come into play that a lot of things fall through, and that's just the nature of it. So it's not a big deal anymore. There's so many leads I've gotten on things that haven't panned out. But I was very excited when they reached out to me for Game of Thrones, but I tried not to get too excited about it. And at a time it looked like it wasn't going to work because of just the logistics of working overseas. It's really, I think that's the biggest thing is it's kind of a bigger deal that I was an American that got to work on the show because it did film in the UK.
Right.
Working over there, their film industry is crazy. They have so many big a lot of the Star Wars Marvel is over there. And so for their stunt performers, it actually isn't that crazy that to work on Game of Thrones, because so many people work on it over there. When I was over there, they were the people I was working with were switching, between like Star Wars, Wonder Woman, Game of Thrones, just like on a monthly basis. But I would say for me as an American, that was the biggest thing, because it's really hard to work over there overseas just because of the logistics of like work visas, the cost of it. They'll do anything they can to not, need to bring someone that they don't have available over there. So I think that was the biggest thing, is at the time, they didn't have somebody who was the right size, the right look, and had the skills that they needed in the UK. So they ended up reaching out. They just found my information on my website and just sent me a little inbox one day.
How about that?
I know. And
what was it like to open up that email? Huh?
I remember telling John when I woke up to it, and I was like, John, guess what?
Oh my goodness!
Got an email from Game of Thrones. But again, I try not to get too my hopes up, but because there was a lot of logistics, it didn't seem like it was going to work out because of all that. And then about a month later, it was like, okay, we're going. Can you leave in a week? And so I started working on the show on season 6. Was the first time on the show, and I ended up doing season 6, 7, and 8. Yeah. And it was such an incredible experience for me. It kind of comes back because for me, it was such a great opportunity to travel, to work. We filmed in Belfast, which is in Northern Ireland, was the studios, but we also filmed in Spain, in these like small towns in Spain. And so just traveling alone for me was really exciting. And again, coming from like someone in the UK, it's not as big of a deal because it's quite normal for them. But so I spent a lot of time in Ireland.
Wow, that's great.
Between the 3 seasons, and the last season was the longest. I spent about 8 months living in Belfast.
Oh my goodness.
And did a lot of traveling and just meeting new people. And it's just a whole new experience than say working on a project in the States. So right. I think that for me was very exciting. And, not a lot of people got the opportunity to do that. And so that in itself for me, just like the locations and the people that I got to meet, was such a cool experience. And then of course, just the show is awesome, and the production value on it, seeing everything that goes into it. It's such a huge production that it's like, it blows my mind, to have seen the making of that show, and the scale was incredible.
It kind of led me to my next question. You're there, you're on the set, you're doing things, they're lighting things, they're getting the audio just right, and you come in and do your part, and then to go through that whole process of several takes and this and that, and then at some point you see the finished product of how it turned out and how amazing it is. What's that like for you when you've been involved in something and then all of a sudden the moment comes where you see what it has become? What's that like for you?
That's one of the most rewarding parts, I think, where I really enjoy the process. Like I'm there from the very beginning, where we read it from a script to then creating the action to it changing a million times. I think that from some of the things that I think people don't realize how long the process is. It's like, we don't just show up on set and start filming something. Months prior, we get the script, and then we work with, the directors and the stunt team. It is like, action design really is what I think we do, is like, that's our job, is to create the action. It's not written. It's just like, okay, then there's this big battle scene, epic battle scene is what they'll write.
And you have to create it basically on the fly. Is that what you're saying?
There's a lot, there's some just storyline things. It's like, okay, and then in this scene, so-and-so dies, or so-and-so saves this person, or there has to be some, they will put in what they want, but besides that, it's up to us to create it. Wow. And that process, we go through so many, sometimes they're like, we will create it, and they'll be like, awesome, great. that was easy. And then we'll go through so many different versions of it. And then it's like bringing the actors in and teaching them and, trying to work through the, just the acting beats and the action and making it all vibe together so that everyone's happy. And then, then it's moving it outside in the elements, in the snow, in the wind, and the costumes and the creatures. And there's just the process is just so long, but that's why I love it. And it's so rewarding. And then, then you get to experience seeing it on camera, which so much, it looks so different than what it looks like when you're there. And then the funny thing too is like I spent 8 months over there filming, and we finished like filming in July, and then the show airs like the following April. So It's almost like, so like we've gone through the whole experience, and then it's almost like a year later where I'm already on to my next project, like working and like create, action design for something else by the time that like Game of Thrones even comes out. And I'm like, sometimes I'm like, I totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
Or, it's like, we've already like done it, lived it.
Right.
Moved on, and I'm already like, doing a whole new character on something else by the time it comes out again. So it is kind of like a really interesting process as a whole.
It fascinates me to hear you talk about it, because you've seen, behind the scenes things on eNetwork and when they kind of walking through it, but to hear someone talk about actually living it. And especially for you, like you said, to spend 8 months in a foreign country. I mean, you settle in there. It's not just like you're visiting for a few weeks or a month. You're really, just immersing yourself in her culture on top of it. What an experience for you.
It is an experience, and sometimes it's hard. It's funny. You'll have moments of just, I remember just having specific moments, either if it's like while I'm filming a scene or just kind of when we're just waiting, like we're all, and that's the thing too, is we wear multiple hats. It's like, I was the double for Arya, but we do a lot of other things. I played multiple civilians and, getting, killed by Dragonfire, and then played Children of the Forest, and just like moments when you're like all dressed up as a child of the forest or I've played multiple White Walkers, and, you're just dressed up as a White Walker and you're drinking tea or something and having a normal conversation with like your fellow stunt person. And you're literally just like sitting there like normal people. And there's just moments when you look around and you're like, this is so strange.
Yeah.
Just
surreal.
like having like normal conversations, but you're looking at like a literally like a White Walker next to you, and you're talking about normal things. It's just like it is a very strange lifestyle. That's for sure.
Yeah. Oh, well, those are such cool stories. I mean, I think it's like anything else. You talk to former athletes or pro athletes, and they remember the games and this and that, but their best memories as the years go by are the things you're talking about. It's these moments where you're kind of down and you're just talking and you're just being normal people, whether it's in an airport or a hotel or hanging out before practice. And those are the things that tend to stick with you as years go by.
No, definitely.
Yeah. Such cool stuff. Talking to Kristina Baskett, former All-American gymnast at Utah, who now has spent over a decade in the entertainment business. Well, Kristina, we had you in, as I mentioned earlier, for our Hall of Fame induction ceremony last September. And people maybe don't know that, the night before the banquet, the speeches are all pre-recorded. And the reason why is you have people like me who had never been on a microphone they don't like, and they would get up there and go on for 10 minutes. And then there's other people who are scared to death of talking, and they'd be worried the whole week about this 2-minute speech, and they don't enjoy the night. So we decided to just do the speeches in advance, and we tell everyone, hey, you've got about 90 seconds to thank everyone and tell a quick story, and then we need to get you done. But in your case, you were so good. You came in as I thought you would in one take and nailed it. And I want to have you talk a little bit more about what you went into that night, because people love great stories. And that's kind of why we decided to do this podcast. I mean, anything that has to do with espionage or inside information does well, but love stories do very, very well. And you and John Peel have one that I thought is just awesome. So you're telling me the story that night about how you guys sort of got to know each other and your relationship started back at the U. If you can, just relive that for us in a little bit of a longer version. I promise I won't cut you off this time. So please embellish us with that.
Yes. No, I'm actually really glad you guys pre-recorded those speeches. Like you said, it made it much more enjoyable to not have to worry about that. And just to be able to, put in, make it condensed, but be able to thank everybody that you wanted to. And like we were talking about, a lot of times it's a lot of those little things that make, memories or experiences that much better. And I have so many of those from my time at the U that almost stand out more than the big accomplishments. And of course, it's just like, you'll always remember life-changing moments. And at the time I had no idea that a little spark with football player John Peel would change my life so much. And it's fun to think of those times and actually John and I had very little interaction at the U, but it's funny to think of I can name almost every single one now that I didn't know at the time were going to be so prominent and to lead obviously into we've been married for just over 4 years now, but we actually didn't start dating till when I was in SeaWorld, San Diego.
That's where it started.
Yes.
Wow.
Afterwards,
okay.
But I have lots of little, I can remember every little conversation we had at school up until that point, and where I had no idea, that he was going to be my husband one day. But I will say, because at the time I was very anti football players. And I was very clear that I would never date one. But he definitely was the exception, I think, at the time. But no, I just remember with gymnastics, we have such a great facility that we have our own training room, we have our own weight room, we have our own gym, and we didn't really leave our facility that we didn't have to, which is amazing.
Right.
And a lot of other athletes, they share, the same weight rooms and athletic training rooms and such. So we actually, me and the girls would be excited because in the summertime, we would actually use some of the other facilities like the weight rooms. And in the summer, we got to use like the indoor field and do our weights at the football facility, which for us was very exciting because it was just very. And those like the times when
well put. Yes, very well put.
I remember we'd have our weights training before the football players would come in. And I will always remember just drinking our chocolate milk that we would drink after weights, and just knowing that the football team was coming in, and just maybe lingering a little bit with my teammates just because I knew that John Peel was coming in. And I don't know, we'd always call him John Peel by his full name. It's just a thing. But we'd be like, okay, oh my gosh, here's John Peel. And I just remember those moments of just like waiting in the weight room just so that they would start. And so you can just get a glimpse of them. And at the time it was so, just funny and silly. And I had no idea what it would lead to later on.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And it's just and it's fun for John and I to have those memories too, because it's fun to hear his stories as well, as far as what he remembers he was thinking. And I love that we both shared the same experience at Utah and get to have that and share that always of being Utah athletes and all the memories that came with that. We have a lot of mutual friends. We had a ton of Utah and that are still our friends, and that now we're all having kids together. And it's just fun to have a Utah Athletics family and those that we get to have together in our lives forever and for our own kids.
Yeah, that's so neat. I didn't realize you guys really didn't date here, and I'm not like trying to be a dating show or whatever. But so, how did you guys end up? Because you said you got married in 16. So did your mutual friend from Utah sort of get this started? How did it get going for you two?
I definitely will say that my friends were very pro dating John. Even Megan Marsden. I will say Megan Marsden was probably my biggest advocate to date John Peel.
How about that?
If you ask her too, she'll say the same thing. Where she's like, one of my girls needs to date John Peel. Yeah. And then the other girls were like, Megan, like John, he had mentioned to some of my teammates that he was interested. And ever since she found out that the girls said that he was interested in me, that she never let it go, that she's like, oh my gosh, Kristina, okay, that's going to be you. You're going to date John. So there definitely was, I had some kind of encouragement for it. And, at the time we just hadn't had a lot of interactions. And I had my reservations about football players, but it wasn't until later when we got to spend more time together with scheduling and we ended up crossing paths that I really got to know him, and it was completely shocked me in how he was very different than what I thought at first. Yeah. And was like the nicest, most positive, special people. And we instantly, once I actually got to know him, were at pretty much from then we were set, but he was just very different than what I had pictured in my mind. Yeah. And it's so positive. And so he's just one of those people that everybody loves him and everybody wants. I have to share him a lot, which is bittersweet because he's such a great person and everyone enjoys to be around him so much. And he's so positive. And so there's just something about him that is so likable and lovable that unfortunately I do have to share him quite a bit, but that's because he is one of those people that you're just drawn to. So I'm just really glad I ended up getting a chance to know him.
That's great. I think I met him for the first time this past fall. I wasn't around gymnastics that much when you were here. I'm sure I met you a time or two and never really, dealt with John that much, but I remember at that time, people be like, man, if there's two photogenic athletes, it's Kristina and it's John. I mean, both of you were just like, boom, athletic. And it's not surprising to find out both of you ended up doing what you're doing because he does commercials and some modeling. Is that what John does now?
Yes. No, he does a lot of virtual personal training and branding for major fitness companies. Yeah. And is so natural at it. And I'm so excited and proud for him that he also gets to do what he loves. And again, it kind of, it stems from just our experiences and athletic background. And I love that we've both been able to find something that is very much up our alley and what we enjoy and have been able to make a successful career out of it. Wow.
We've gone so far, Kristina. We started out with gymnastics, pre-college, college gymnastics, entertainment, a love story. I mean, we've covered a lot of things here during this podcast, but that's why I'm so glad you're able to join us. We'll try to get things wrapped up and let you go on through your day and maybe get a nap as an expecting mom. And that kind of leads me to the next thing. I know motherhood is just around the corner for you in the coming weeks, and we appreciate you working us in before your due date. Do you know what you're having?
Yes, I am having a girl that is
awesome.
Our due date is May 5th.
Okay.
Actually, yes.
Very good. Well, I tell you what, I know with everything being shut down, with recruiting not happening, there's some limitations. But if I'm Tom Farden, the moment I hear you going into labor, I'm hopping in the car and I'm driving to Scottsdale to be at the hospital the moment she comes out to be the first one to offer her a scholarship because between yourself and John, I think there might be a chance for something to happen down the road.
That is funny.
I think gymnastics.
Yes, I will say too that that's been one of the funnier and common things that people will say, especially when we're at the Hall of Fame. I think we kind of announced that we were expecting, and everyone was like, "Oh, that athlete," just something about the athletes, or we're gonna, we got dibs on that athlete. Right. So we didn't know what it was at the time. So some of the, the football players and stuff it was just funny that no pressure or anything.
Right.
But they, there's a lot of comments that, on the athleticism that they may inherit. But I wouldn't, if they're a future Utah athlete, I definitely wouldn't be that.
Yeah. Well, obviously it worked out well for you and John to both come through here. And that's great stuff. And I'll let Morgan Scally know that, hey, let's keep tabs on them. There might be some more down the road we need to look for. So that's great. Well,
that would be amazing.
I know you've been coaching at Arizona State this past year, and you've been busy with your photography business, K-Peel Photo, and also I understand you've got another big entertainment Hollywood type project coming up. Tell us about that.
Yes, I'm very excited about this one. So last year I spent another 8 months in Atlanta, Georgia, filming a new comic book series. It's DC Universe comic book series called Stargirl, where I double the character Stargirl. I mean, and it's like, who wouldn't want to be a superhero in their lifetime?
Right.
So I literally got to be a superhero. And to be honest, it's probably my favorite project I've done and what I'm most proud of coming up. So I'm very excited. It comes out on May 19th on CW channel. And it's actually it's a good family show. It's one of those that is good for the whole family, especially if you're into superhero stuff. But I will say, I think just my experience on the action design on this show, I've never worked so hard. I've never been so challenged, and which means that just the reward on it. I think out of everything I've done, I'm most excited about this project. So that's really exciting. And then to go from finishing that to then getting to spend the year with ASU as the assistant coach this last season. And then all, the news of expecting, all of those has kind of made this last year pretty exciting in many different areas.
I would say so. Yes.
Yeah.
My goodness.
So all really good things and good experiences, that have come from this last year. And, I literally, once I finished, when I flew home from Atlanta, that same day I went to ASU to start coaching for this upcoming season. It worked out really well just for pregnancy. Obviously I can't do stunt work while I'm pregnant. It's just not very safe. And I want to fit in my superhero costume, but so that was actually worked out really well. And it was a really great experience to spend with ASU. I volunteer coached with them the last few seasons. So I actually had been a part of the program for a couple years. And then just this year I spent more time there with them. And I think the biggest thing with that has been such a cool experience because now, I'm such an advocate and such a fan of NCAA athletics that it just really I was just really excited to be a part of it and see, it's a very different program than University of Utah and different experience. But I love the fact that now I can just be a really big fan of NCAA gymnastics all around. Not only, of course, is Utah going to be my number one always, but I also get to, then I also get to be a fan of ASU. And I've just kind of grown my knowledge and respect for Pac-12. And then just with the sport in general, I've just gotten to learn more and see more of the sport. And so for me, it's just like expanded my experience and my love. And I feel like I get even more out of it on top of what I already have and feel for Utah.
That's awesome. So Stargirl, is this a 1-year deal and see how it goes, or what's the future look like for that? Or is it hard to tell at this point?
It's hard to tell at this point. You never know. As of right, you never know. As of right now, we are planning to film a season 2. I'm not sure when, especially with all this stuff going on right now.
Right.
But I think, for me, I knew it was hard for John and I to plan to start a family. We've always known we wanted to do that. But for me, it was particularly hard because it really would affect my career in a big way because my career is so physical. It literally would stop it for a time being. And then, moving forward, it will be different but we knew that's what we wanted to do in starting a family and had planned it at this time. And so moving forward, it will be interesting because I really do want to continue doing stunt work. But I think it's just going to look a little bit different as far as what type of jobs I will take and for how long. I don't know if I'll be doing any 8-month overseas job, or even, kind of these 8-month commitments for full season shows may not be the best thing for the near future, maybe down the line. A lot of people do it in the industry. You just have to kind of make it work. But, for now, it may be shorter jobs of just, popping onto, different, more sitcoms or, day or two roles in LA for the time being, which I also love doing. So I'm just going to have to kind of figure out what that looks like with a family and with a baby, as far as those bigger jobs go, or just kind of, dabbling in LA when I can, kind of popping into 1 or 2 day jobs. And then of course, John's job, I kind of let that take priority, and both of our jobs are very unpredictable and are hard to plan, but we're so used to that now that we just kind of go with it and see what jobs work. And, sometimes you have to turn down those big jobs that you want to do. I don't know how many times I turned down jobs because I was on something else. You get a text message being like, oh, can you do Fast and Furious? Oh, can you do Milan? Can you do like so many things that you turn down because you're on other projects. And it's just, for now, I'm on another project of starting a family. And I'll just kind of have to pick and choose. And I would love to do season 2 of Stargirl, but we'll see if that works out for our family. And if not, then there's always something else. So I'm not too worried.
I wouldn't be if I were you. It's been a pretty good run. I tell you what, you have totally legitimized our podcast, Kristina, to have someone like you come on and talk about their current work and what's ahead. I mean, Ryan Seacrest and E-Network had nothing on us after what you've given us today. This has been awesome. I really appreciate you joining us. Just listening to your story. One of my favorite quotes has been, does life find you, or do you find your life? Mm-hmm. And, you talk about kind of your winding road through elite gymnastics in college and photography, and ending up to do what you've been doing, and your life with John. What a life you've led already, and you're still pretty young, but just amazing to hear you kind of recount all the key moments and things. I appreciate you so much for coming by and joining us and sharing your story, Kristina.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. And I love sharing my story because I do, and I love sharing it to other young gymnasts and just athletes in general, because I do feel like, I took a lot of risks in trying, like what you were saying, of just trying to find, instead of life finding me, finding it and finding things that I loved and just running with it and going with it. And they paid off big time. And so I like sharing my story with younger athletes, or anybody really, just to show the risk and reward and just going for what you love. And it's been such a great experience for me. And I'm so glad that I was able to have all these opportunities. And I will always say it stemmed from my time at Utah, and I'm still grateful. And so I love being able to share that story to other people. And I'm excited to hear other people's stories on this podcast as well.
We'll check back in a few weeks. We'll have some more while you're maybe doing some, thing of the baby late at night. You can turn us on and see who came on in about a month or so. How's that sound?
That sounds perfect. I look forward to it.
Well, listen, Kristina, again, thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully this COVID-19 situation gets behind us. We can have gymnastics again next year. And if not, regular season, we'll see you at the Pac-12 Championships next March at the Maverick Center. Yeah. How's that sound?
I agree. I like it. Yes, hopefully
awesome.
I'll get back to the things we love.
Yes. All the best with motherhood. Good luck with that. And, all the best to you and John, and we'll see you down the road. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. That's Kristina Baskett, a former 12-time All-American gymnast, national champion on bars for the Utes back in 2006. And since then, quite the rise she's had through the Hollywood scene. A stunt performer, a long list of commercials and shows to her credit, and also working as an assistant gymnastics coach at Arizona State, and an expecting mom. So she's had a busy life, and we appreciate Kristina dropping by on the Utes Insider podcast. We'll be back to wrap things up in just a moment. This is Utes Insider, presented by Pepsi.
Stay connected by searching for Utah Athletics on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Now back to more Utes Insider, presented by Pepsi.
Wow, so much fun to catch up with Kristina Baskett. We talked for well over an hour, and I wasn't sure how long we'd go, but someone who's obviously very comfortable in front of the camera, and really just what fun stories to tell with her career at the U and the Hollywood scene, and now selling into a life as an expecting mom with former Utah football player John Peel in Scottsdale, Arizona, and just fun to catch up with her. Like I said, one of my favorite sayings is, does life find you, or do you find your life? And she's had a kind of a mix of both, as most people do, and just fun to have her recount her time in Utah and everything she's done since then. Again, over a decade in the entertainment business. Well, we're back with another show next week. In fact, if you have an idea for a guest, we invite you to reach out to us on Twitter at Utah Athletics and use the hashtag Utes Insider. If you have somebody you'd like to hear for on Utes Insider and upcoming shows, let us know, and we'll do our best to reach out to them, and we'll see what we can do for you. That will do it for this show. Again, thank you to Kristina Baskett, former Utah gymnast. That will do it for us. I'm Mike Lageschulte for Utes Insider, presented by Pepsi. Until next time, so long, everybody.
This has been Utes Insider presented by Pepsi. To hear more episodes of this show and other Utah athletics podcasts, search for them on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube.